Let me tell you a story about a girl named Jasmine. She was a transfer student starting the 10th grade in a new school. On the first day, she wandered into the cafeteria tray in hand and saw tables were more than just places to sit. They were borders of belonging. Athletes at one table, theater kids at another, troublemakers in the back. Every table sent a message. She finally sat with a group of girls who welcomed her, until they laughed at a joke she didn't think was funny and didn't understand it. But she fake laughed along, not because she found it funny, but because she wanted to fit in. That one lunch table, where she sat, how she acted, and how she was seen ended up shaping how teachers, peers, and even herself perceived her for the rest of the year. That's sociological social psychology in action. It's not just about what Jasmine thought or how she felt. It's about the invisible social rules, the group dynamics, and status systems that shaped her experience. Today, we're going to explore 3 different lenses to help us understand the moments like these: symbolic interactionism, social structure and personality, and group processes. Why do we act the way that we do? Did you know in 1961, psychologist Albert Bandura showed kids a film of an adult beating up a clown doll? Afterwards, most of the kids saw it, did the same thing. It was one of the first studies to show how powerfully we imitate behavior, especially in groups and through media. Sociological social psychology explores how society shapes the individual and how individuals shape society in 3 major ways. Today, we dive into the foundational perspectives in sociological social psychology. These aren't just abstract theories. They explain how we communicate, why we follow the social rules that we do, and how group dynamics shape everything from family dinners to revolutions. Think of these perspectives as lenses you can use to decode social life. Ultimately, it helps us to answer the question, why do we act the way that we do? In many ways, symbolic interactionism is the most fundamental of all the perspectives. It posits that our social world is built through continuous interaction with each other, shared meaning making. It emphasizes that reality is not simply out there, but is actively created and recreated in every interaction. This perspective highlights human agency, suggesting that while we are shaped by society, we also actively contribute to its ongoing construction. A thumbs up gesture, it means good job, okay, isn't inherent. It's something we collectively agree through countless social interactions that's what it's going to mean for us. This shared understanding allows us to communicate efficiently. Similarly, the meaning of a college degree isn't fixed. It's socially constructed as well, leading to its value in the job market. Symbolic interaction is rooted in the work of George Herbert Mead and Herbert Bloomer. You want to get to know their names. And their views of society help us to understand how everyday interactions contribute to the continuation of the society the way it is. We learn who we are by watching how others respond to us. Think of life as a stage. We play roles, we give performances, and interpret other people's reactions. Think about ordering coffee. You follow an unspoken script. Script is going to be an important word this semester. You line up, you say hi, you give your order, you say thank you. Deviate from this script, and other people will notice, and they typically don't like it. Think of social interaction as a game. These 3 principles are the hidden rule book everyone is following, whether you know it or not. Principle number 1, meanings arise through social interaction among individuals. George Herbert Mead believed that human gestures and exchange of symbols, like language, are central to social psychology. The second principle is that people use those meanings that they derive from interaction to guide their own behavior. These meanings tell us how to think, feel, or act, motivating us to maintain or to achieve goals. And the third principle is very important. We employ an interpretive process regarding these interactions. This leads to the concept of the Thomas theorem, and you really want to get to know the Thomas theorem. And that is, when people define situations as real, it becomes real in their consequences. When people define situations as real, those situations become real in their consequences. If you believe that someone is going to harm you, what are you going to do? You're probably going to try to avoid them and move away. But if you haven't met them and you're only basing it on looks from a distance, the reality that you're using is what you think that person might mean to you. And you base your decisions on what you think is happening in that. You read the signs. What are they wearing? How are they acting? And you're using that to make decisions. And it makes sense because we all have to take care of ourselves. And if we interpret danger, we move away from danger. However, you later come to learn that that person is a nice person and not harmful at all. And you have to change the meaning of that person, and hence you change the way you interact with them. And we do this in a split second in every interaction with every other human being. It may not be about danger, it might be about something else. But once we define something as real, then we base our decisions, our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior on whatever that reality is that we just created. While we use these principles in our day-to-day life, including the Thomas theorem, there are things that can have huge impacts on entire societies. Consider things like the Great Depression. It's generally believed that the Great Depression started when people believed that their money was not secure in the banks. So they ran to the banks to try to get all their money out. But when they tried to collect all that money at the same time, the entire banking system collapsed. That is how the Thomas theorem applies, not just for our day-to-day lives, but it can impact the entire society. Our next perspective, social structure and personality, helps us understand how our roles and positions in society impact our day-to-day lives. Social structure and personality connects the dots between the social institutions we live under, like education or family, and our inner worlds. Researchers look at how our jobs, class, even our neighborhoods affect how we think about the world. It reminds us that individual experiences are deeply embedded within broader societal patterns. It highlights how factors like social class, gender, race, and institutions we interact with profoundly shape our attitudes, behaviors, and even our personalities. This perspective is crucial for understanding how we live in this world today. The puzzle of social structure. These three principles provide a detailed framework for tracing the influence of social structure down to the individual level. The components principle identifies the source. The proximity principle explains the pathways through which this influence is felt. And the psychology principle delves into the internal processes of how we internalize social life. Together, they offer a powerful model for understanding how macro-level forces shape our micro-level experiences. First, there's the components principle. We must identify the specific elements of society most likely to affect a given attitude or behavior. Think about our statuses, roles, and social networks, the things we taught you in the toolkit. So in every interaction you're in, for each person, you should be able to identify the roles and groups and statuses that they are part of, and that should help you develop a picture of what's going on in the scenario. The proximity principle says that we feel the effects of society primarily through our interpersonal interactions and communications with the people around us. Society impacts us most often through the institutions like work and family. And finally, the psychology principle is how we need to understand how individuals internalize these proximal experiences. This focuses on the processes that lead people to follow or defy the social norms and rules and demands that they're put under. Let's try to find a really good example of bringing all of these principles together in one. Imagine a scenario where someone's experiencing a job loss during an economic downturn, like, say, a depression. From the role of being employed to unemployed. That's a change in roles, the components principle. They may feel the economic downturn not through watching the news and seeing what's going on in larger society, but rather directly through the loss of income and its immediate impact on their family. And over time, this experience might lead them to internalize a sense of insecurity about the job market or become more frugal. Alternatively, they might use this situation to create a new path for their future. In any case, the situation is driving internal processing, and that's the psychology principle. Our final perspective that we're going to study throughout the semester is called group processes. There's a lot to unpack with it. I'm going to try to keep this as short as I possibly can. But one of the biggest things I want to get across this today is I really want you to be thinking that from this perspective, the structure of groups can impact people's thoughts, feelings, and behavior above and beyond their statuses and roles in the group itself. Think about how profound that is. Simply going from a dyad to a triad, according to George Simmel, the godfather of group processes research, simply going from a dyad, a two-person group, to a triad, three-person group, exponentially decreases the amount of intimacy possible and increases the number of interactions. Have you ever heard the expression, three's a crowd? Well, that's what we're talking about. But what I want to get across is that no matter what your personality is, your statuses, roles, and so forth that you bring into the group, there's elements of the group that impact you above and beyond anything else in that particular situation. Another way that groups can influence us outside of our roles and statuses, outside of our personalities that we bring into any interaction, include the type of group that we interact with. There are primary groups and secondary groups, and a distant third are what are called reference groups. Primary groups are those that we have strong ties with. They include our friends and our family. And obviously, when we're interacting in our primary groups, we're more relaxed, we're ourselves, and so forth. When we interact in secondary groups, that are groups that we interact with in order to get the things we need in this world, they typically include things like our work lives and so forth. We're a little bit more formal. We're a little bit more guarded in what we do. And finally, reference groups are those we may not even interact with on a regular basis in any way. We certainly are not intimate with them. They still influence us because they're things like memberships to clubs and so forth where we're not very intimate, but it might be something important to you, such as being a member of an environmentalist club or something like that. It still influences us, but in a different way than primary and secondary groups. So just being a member of these different groups influences how we think, feel, and behave above and beyond our role statuses and personalities that we bring to an interaction. And knowing that will help us understand why people decide to behave the way they do in those particular settings. Have you ever been in a work group where someone dominated the group, even though they were not in charge, at least not officially? Maybe someone at work who got a raise, but you know that they don't deserve it. The group processes perspective zooms in on micro-level dynamics in small groups, providing a critical lens to hierarchy, fairness, and other influences that govern group dynamics. While primary groups and those other elements of group life are important, we're going to spend most of the semester in group work looking at power, status, justice, and legitimacy. Power, the ability to get what you want despite resistance. Status, our relative position in the group associated with esteem and respect. Justice, the perceptions of fairness in social arrangements. And legitimacy, the sense that social arrangements are the way they're supposed to be. Get to know these four things because we're going to spend a lot of time this semester looking at it. The good news is we're going to also give you some tips when you're living in those situations that are not fair, the best way to manage those things and deal with them, at least understand them a little bit better than before you took this class. Think of these theories as overlapping maps. Symbolic interaction shows us how we make meaning, we create society, our relationships, our very selves. Social structure and personality shows how institutions shape us, notably through roles, statuses, and group affiliations. And finally, group processes shows us how we function in groups above and beyond our roles and statuses that we have. When used together, they give us a more complete picture of social life and the self. I guarantee that if you fully understand these perspectives, you will never be able to look at your interactions with friends, family, coworkers, professors, and bosses the same ever again. But we have a long way to go. We have just opened the door to this discussion. We have a lot more to learn about how each of these perspectives can help us understand our lives better. So hold on, we've got quite a ride ahead of us.